I am just beside myself because Vindman walks, McCabe walks. Are you going to tell me to wait for Durham? Because if you tell me to wait for Durham, I'm going to throw something at Vince.
Well, let's just look at this for a second. I want to deal with McCabe because that's actually pretty easy. We have a big problem in the District of Columbia, and everybody needs to wake up to it. We have a jury pool that is biased against the president and people in his administration and friends of his. We had several problems in the McCabe case, and the jury pool is one of them. Number one, we had a very weak U.S. attorney, Jesse Liu, who was risk-averse, didn't want to take chances, screwed up a bunch of cases before this one. She was succeeded by this guy, Shea, who was sent over by Bill Barr. He apparently was lied to by the 4 assistant U.S. attorneys about what their sentencing recommendation was going to be. McCabe should have been indicted, but I think the department made a decision that given the status of the case and the length of time, they weren't going to take a risk with a D.C. jury. And let me just say this about D.C. juries. The federal judges in the district are not doing their jobs of properly questioning prospective jurors during jury questioning. Best example is the 4-person in the Roger Stone jury case was making public statements about it recently, and she also had been tweeting anti-Trump tweets about this before she was selected as a juror, and apparently nobody knew about that. How the hell does that happen? Now, that's one example. Second example, Scooter Libby case. The voir dire in that case, the questioning of jurors, was horrific. When the case was over, the jury foreman, who was a former Washington Post reporter, first words out of his mouth to the press, why wasn't Dick Cheney on trial along with Scooter Libby? Now, if that doesn't show a problem with the jury pool in the district, I don't know what does. Bottom line is they decided they're going to wait on Andrew McCabe because there are other cases against him pending.
Well, what can be done about the jury pool in the district? Can they try these cases outside the district?
Change of venue. Well, you have to go to the judge. If you're indicted in the District of Columbia, you immediately ask for a change of venue. And if the judge doesn't grant it, you note an objection. You try to do an appeal. It's very, very difficult. But the bottom line is this is anarchy. This is judicial anarchy on the sloppiness by federal judges and jurors lying. The way you deal with this is what should have happened in the Kavanaugh case. Remember when those women came up and lied, all those false accusations? Not one of them was prosecuted by the Justice Department for obstructing a congressional investigation. They should have been prosecuted. The way you deter this stuff is you prosecute people who lie as jurors. This woman, who's the 4-person in the Roger Stone case, and she's a lawyer, by the way. She wasn't just John Q. Citizen. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was designing to get on that jury so she could convict Roger Stone. This is absolutely outrageous what has happened. Listen, there are not a lot of easy answers to this. If you can bring a case somewhere other than the District of Columbia, by God, you better.
But Joe, here's the thing. It sounds like it's not just a juror problem. It sounds as if it's a judicial problem as well.
Absolutely. These guys and gals let me tell you what happens to federal judges. They get pompous. They get arrogant. They get isolated. The notion that woman who was on the Stone jury could get through a legitimate jury questioning period is absolutely ridiculous. There's no way she should have ever gotten through. And there's no way that Washington Post reporter ever should have been on the Scooter Libby jury. There is a crisis in the District of Columbia about juries and jury selection. Nobody wants to deal with it because nobody wants to be called a racist. But it isn't black jurors that are doing this. It's any kind of juror. It's got nothing to do with race. It's got to do with the fact that Democrats in the District of Columbia, for the most part, hate this president. They should not be in these jury pools.
Okay, we're getting to so many issues, and I've wanted to talk to you over the last week a lot, Joe. So let's just start with McCabe, and then we'll get to each of these other ones. In McCabe's case, it seems like even if you had a biased jury pool, it is open and shut. The reason I think that way is he does lie 4 times to the FBI and the Justice Department. And to emphasize that he lied, he made a call the day that he leaked to the Wall Street Journal to scold the FBI's Manhattan field office and the Washington Bureau as well. In so doing, isn't he proving his guilt by blaming other people for doing what he now admits he did?
This guy is such a sleazeball. He is a scumbag. You watch him on CNN. First of all, if you've ever seen him, he's very diminutive. He's very slender. He's like a reed, and he has that wiry, nasty look, sort of like Cassius. He's just nauseatingly unctuous. He's the typical Comey acolyte. They're all weird. They're all small. They're all whiny. They're all pajama boys. I mean, he's not my idea of an FBI agent. This guy's a pushover, physically, literally. You could brush by him in the hallway and he'd fall over. He's a conniving little SOB. The truth is, he should have been indicted. He should have been tried. Even if you're going to lose this case, you got to indict these people. You got to make them go to trial. You got to make them hire a lawyer. You got to make them take the stand. Maybe they'll lie again. It doesn't matter. The fact that he wasn't indicted is directly related to you had a lousy United States attorney, Jessie Liu. She was risk averse. What did she want in life? The next job. And she tried to get it at Treasury, and then the president finally figured out she was a loser, and he pulled the plug on her. And good for you, Mr. President.
Yeah, well, I'm to Vince's point. I think I could get an indictment with McCabe.
By the way, if the grand jury in the District of Columbia didn't want to indict him, you can file an information for a misdemeanor. Make him go to trial. File 6 misdemeanors. Make him go to trial if the D.C. grand jury won't indict. This is nonsense.
Now, the thing that really sticks out to me about McCabe is this is the very same guy who tells Mike Flynn he doesn't need a lawyer the day that he ends up lying to the FBI by their accusation. Yeah. And I'm looking at this scoreboard, Joe. You've got McCabe, Brennan, Clapper, Comey. None of these guys charged. No prosecution for any of their lies or leaks. And meanwhile, you got Cohen, Flynn, Stone, Gates, Papadopoulos, either convicted and sentenced or awaiting sentencing. Why is it so disparate?
It's disparate because there is, in fact, a 2-tiered system of justice in the country today. One involving Democrats, you get off. Look at that. Where's the Podesta indictment for the failure to register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act? Where's that indictment? Where are the indictments of Hillary Clinton for deleting 30,000 emails? By the way, if Bloomberg picks her to be his vice presidential candidate, the first question that should be asked, when are they going to close the Clinton Foundation down so she and Bill can't start shaking down people for contributions again like they did when she was Secretary of State, and he can't get $500,000 for a speech from a foreign government or a corporation overseas connected with a foreign government? Well, let's see how much he can live with the Clinton dredgings from the bottom of the sea. Listen, this is disgusting. There's a double standard in the country now. This is a big responsibility that Bill Barr has. I trust him. I think that Durham's doing his job. I hope that he brings indictments. People have to be charged. If they're not charged, this will all be a disaster for the administration of justice in this country. We cannot have people conspiring to overthrow an election while they are federal law enforcement officials in the Department of Justice under Obama and the FBI under Obama and get away with it, or the CIA under Obama. This was a cabal. It was planned. It was executed, and McCabe was at the center of it. I hope he's part of a conspiracy charge.
All right. Well, more with Joe DiGenova coming up because we still have to explore Vindman not getting he also gets off the hook, but Michael Flynn still firmly on the hook. That's all coming up. We're here with Joe DiGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, just very quickly, because there's so much we want to get to with you. You mentioned the Clinton Foundation there. Whatever happened to the investigation into the Clinton Foundation?
Over, done with.
Of
done.
course,
nothing there. According to Huber or whoever the hell was assigned to it. I don't get it. Let me just tell you something. I do not get it. Just the same way I don't get Uranium One. That's an open and shut bribery collusion case involving the Clintons. Uranium One is a locked case. Nothing there. I have to tell you something. If you don't investigate these cases right away and bring charges, the longer they last, the easier it becomes to claim political involvement or political motivation. By the way, those 4 assistant U.S. attorneys who resigned from the Roger Stone case, the one guy resigned from government, so you can't fire him. The other 3 who went back to their regular DOJ jobs, they should all be fired for insubordination. They had a word at the front of their title, assistant United States attorney. That means they work for the U.S. attorney and the attorney general, who has a right to involve himself in any case because they are his cases as the attorney general. These little twits should all be fired.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to watch. Now, one of the big stories, of course, that developed over the last week is the Roger Stone story. And the first signs in public we get the sentencing recommendation of up to 9 years in prison. The president responding in public. Meanwhile, Attorney General Bill Barr says behind the scenes that he was already issuing caution once he saw the headlines and said, we've got to change that recommendation. That is inappropriate. And all of those things happen in tandem. You got now 1,100 former DOJ officials calling for Bill Barr to resign because he dare ask for a shorter sentence for Roger Stone. What do you make of that story and Bill Barr's actions specifically?
Well, first of all, the letter from the 1,000, they're all political hacks. This has nothing to do with, they all know that the Attorney General has the authority to take control of any case he wants, particularly ones that are so politically volatile. That's nonsense. Bill Barr did exactly the right thing. These 4 assistant U.S. attorneys, Zelensky, Jed, Mirando, and Kravis, purposely asked for too much time. They wanted to be overruled by the Justice Department to create a political crisis so that they could resign from the case. This was all planned. Now, how does this happen? When you have a lousy, weak United States attorney like Jesse Liu, and then you have a new guy come in who doesn't have his bearings yet, they twisted him, they turned this guy Shea into contortions, and they screwed him. And they tried to screw Barr. These 4 people, except for the one who's already resigned, should all be fired. This was a plot purposely designed to embarrass the Attorney General. And that letter from these morons who used to be DOJ lawyers, check out who they voted for and what party they're registered in. And the never-Trumper Republicans don't count.
But see, Joe, they're so comfortable signing a letter like that because they know nothing's going to happen. They can act with impunity in Washington, D.C. because they know that because they are never-Trumpers.
These are former DOJ people, not current.
Okay. I thought they were current DOJ people.
These are not current DOJ people. Believe me, anybody signs that letter as a current DOJ person, they get reassigned. If I'm in charge, they get reassigned to the Saturday morning case intake for the rest of their lives. Every one of these 4 assistants, except the one who resigned, should be, not only, if they're not going to fire them, put them in the civil division. Believe me, they'll all commit suicide.
We've got Bill Barr has now assigned on another issue, the Mike Flynn case. He's assigned an outside federal prosecutor to review now the government's case against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. What do you make of that announcement?
Well, I think it's appropriate given the situation of the case. It's a historically bad, politically motivated case. We know that McCabe was involved in framing Michael Flynn. We know that Flynn didn't violate the law. We knew that the FBI had the actual recording of his conversation with the ambassador. So there was no reason to interview him because they already had the content of the call. Why do you interview him? You interview him with one reason, to entrap him into a false statement. But oops, the agents who interviewed Flynn said, you know what? He didn't lie to us. We don't believe he was lying. And McCabe says, screw it, change the 302s. I hope he gets indicted for telling them to change the 302s. So, I think that the review of the case is important. It's going to take somebody pretty ballsy to say, throw it out. It was all corrupt. We can't have this type of indictment of an official under any circumstances, but especially a presidential campaign during a transition and shortly after they take office. This was a continuation of Crossfire Hurricane, which Barack Obama was briefed on, knew everything about, and approved 100%. We are not at the end of this story. But I'll tell you something. If there are no indictments after Durham finishes, we are going to have a crisis in this country of belief and faith in the criminal justice system like you have never seen. And we are going to find jury nullifications all over the country. They're going to start letting people off, just like they did after Nixon was pardoned in Watergate. There were nullifications by juries all over this country because Nixon was pardoned. They let all kinds of criminals off. The same thing is going to happen here. Brennan, Clapper, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Baker, all of these people, including the guy over at the DOD that ran Halper, all of these people must be held accountable. And if that does not happen, if Durham ends up with nothing, a zero from Durham, boy, I'll tell you something. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near a presidential motorcade if the president were behind the wheel.
Just very quickly, Joe, Andrew Weissmann was on MSNBC with Chuck Todd, and he said that this appointing of this new prosecutor in the Michael Flynn case, he said that the DOJ just swapped out the loser case of Andrew McCabe for a fresh one targeting former FBI officials Comey, McCabe, Peter Strzok under the guise of this special prosecutor for Michael Flynn. What do you think of that?
Weissmann is a corrupt, politically corrupt former prosecutor. After the Mueller probe ended, what did he do? Did he go back to justice where he could have been investigated for his conduct? No, he quit. He went to teach law school. Now he's on television lying through his teeth. What is happening now under Bill Barr is the way the department should be run. Not Andrew Weissmann being a thug, ruining Arthur Anderson, destroying the lives of 50 or 60 people, getting reversed 9-0 in the Supreme Court for his legal theory of the case in Arthur Anderson. Andrew Weissmann is a thug. He is a politically corrupt prosecutor, and he's right where he belongs, on NBC.
All right. Joe DiGenova, thank you so much. We always appreciate your analysis, and we look forward to it every week.